There are many ways that we could describe you, such as identifying some of your traits. What are your traits? You have many, but as some examples, we can identify whether you are a boy or if you're a girl. We can describe the color and texture of your hair. Is your hair blonde, brown, black, or red? Is it straight, wavy, curly, or kinky? Is it thin, thick, or in between? We can also identify the color and shape of your eyes. We can describe your skin tone or shade as well as your skin type. There are also many different shapes of people's faces, noses, and chins. You also have a blood type, of which there are 8 different ones. There can also be a lot to say about your body type, like your height, weight, and bone structure. You have a unique combination of all of these different traits and more that make you look different from everyone else. But how are your traits determined? What makes you, you? To understand where your traits come from, first we need to understand DNA, which is like the instruction manual for your body. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. You don't have to memorize that. DNA is the molecule or group of atoms that contains your genetic code. DNA is sometimes shown as looking like this. If you had a very powerful microscope and zoomed in on your DNA, it would look like an extremely long, tiny ladder that is twisted. Your DNA sequence is unique to you. No one else's DNA is exactly like yours, unless you have an identical twin. Since everyone's DNA is at least a little bit different, this means that each human is at least a little bit different from each other. DNA is like your body's instruction manual for how your body should be built and how it should function. Most of the cells in your body contain a nucleus, which is like the control center for a cell, telling the rest of the cell parts what to do. Each nucleus in your cells contains a copy of your DNA instruction manual. Now, your DNA genetic code is extremely long, like over 6 feet long if you connected every strand. That's really long for something so tiny that is present in every single one of the nuclei in your cells. Your body contains trillions of copies of your DNA. To keep it all organized, so it's not all jumbled up in a giant tangled mess, everyone's DNA is very tightly coiled and packed into something called chromosomes. If your DNA is like the instruction manual for your body, each chromosome is like a chapter in that instruction manual. You might see them in diagrams looking like an X. That's because they are. Most people have a total of 46 chromosomes in their bodies, coming in 23 pairs. 23 chromosomes came from your biological mother and 23 from your biological father. You are an equal mixture of both your biological parents' DNA. Next, we need to understand genes. Oftentimes, we use the terms DNA and genes interchangeably, but they aren't exactly the same thing. A single gene is a small section of a chromosome, and therefore it is a small section of your DNA. It could look something like this. This is a chromosome, and then a small section of the DNA highlighted could represent just one gene. Another way to understand all of this is to look at this image. Remember, we have cells, and inside of most of our cells, we have a nucleus. The nucleus of each cell contains all of our chromosomes. Our chromosomes are wound up parts of our DNA, like taking strands of yarn and making them into neat yarn balls. If we took one of those balls of yarn, a chromosome, and unraveled it, we would see long strands of our DNA. A small section of that DNA could be a gene. The reason we need to understand genes is because most genes contain the instructions for making a specific protein. We'll talk about proteins in just a minute and why they are so important, but you need to know that your genes code for the proteins that your body makes. Humans have approximately 20,000 to 25,000 different genes that code for proteins. These genes only make up about 2% of all of our DNA. That other 98% of our DNA has other purposes. It is important that you understand proteins, including what they are and how they work, because proteins made in your body are the reason why you have a lot of the traits that you have. Everyone has a different combination of proteins in their body, and the recipes used to build people's proteins are different. So that's why people look different from one another. Why is your hair color the color that it is? Because the proteins that your body makes cause your hair to be that color. Why is your skin color that tone? Well, it's because of the proteins that your body makes that causes your skin to be that tone. Why are your eyes brown or blue or green or gray or hazel? Because the proteins that your body makes cause your eyes to be that color. It all comes down to the proteins that your body makes. So this is the answer to our original question we asked at the start of this video. Our traits are determined because of the proteins that our body makes, and the recipe for those proteins come from our genes in our DNA. So what exactly are proteins? It's important to note that we are not talking about the food molecules that we get when we eat certain foods like bacon and eggs, nor are we talking about what is required to build muscle. Again, that is not what we mean when we talk about the proteins that are coded in our DNA. They are not the same and not what we are discussing in this unit. Instead, this is the definition that you need to know. Proteins are large molecules or groups of atoms that are like the workers in our body doing many different jobs. It's also important to note that our bodies make these proteins for us. They don't come from food that we eat. Let's talk about some of the things that these proteins might do for us. For example, some proteins are antibodies that help our bodies fight viruses and bacteria that could make us sick. Other proteins are messengers that can send signals between cells and tissues and organs to make certain body processes happen that we need to stay alive and healthy. Other proteins are builders that provide structure and support for our cells, and they can also repair damaged cells and cell parts. Other proteins help with transport and storage. They can bind and carry atoms and molecules all throughout the body where they need to go. Remember that genes, which are small sections of our DNA, contain the code for making these proteins. So the instructions that our body needs to make these proteins for us are found in our DNA. Next, I'd like to show you a couple of examples of how the actions of proteins affect our traits. First, we'll examine hair, skin, and eye color. We have special cells in our body that make pigments or coloring called melanin. Proteins in our body help these cells to make melanin. The types and amounts of melanin in our bodies greatly affects the color of our hair, skin, and eyes. Some of the genes that we have in our DNA code for proteins, in this case, enzymes that speed up chemical reactions. These proteins affect the types and amounts of melanin being made, how that melanin is packaged, how it travels, and how quickly the cells that make melanin break down. A person with lighter hair, skin, and eyes probably has proteins in their body that cause less melanin to be produced. A person with darker hair, skin, and eyes probably have proteins in their body that cause more melanin to be produced. So, a big part of the reason why your hair, eyes, and skin are the color that they are is because of the proteins your body produces and how that affects melanin production. Another example of a trait affected by proteins created by your body is your blood type. There are 8 different blood types in total. There's A, B, AB, and O. And each of those has a positive type and a negative type. If you ask your parents, they might be able to tell you your blood type. Mine is O positive. Your blood type determines things like who you can give to and receive blood from. What we need to know about blood type is that our bodies make proteins that attach to our red blood cells. These special proteins are called antigens. The combinations of these proteins that you have or don't have determine your blood type. Type A blood has A antigens. Type B blood has B antigens. Type AB blood has both A and B antigens. Type O blood has neither antigens. They don't have A or B antigens. Positive blood has the Rh factor antigen, and negative blood does not. What's really cool is that O negative blood can actually be given to any person no matter their blood type. So it is referred to as the universal donor. This is because it doesn't have any A, B, or Rh antigens. So it doesn't trigger an immune response in the recipient's body. However, O negative blood is in high demand and is relatively rare. So it's often reserved for emergency situations and when there's a shortage of matched blood types. Conversely, people with AB positive blood are often referred to as the universal recipients because they can receive blood from donors of any blood type without having a major reaction. This is because their blood already has all of the antigens present in their body because they have A, B, and Rh factor antigens. So, let's go back to our original question that we asked at the start of this video. How are your traits determined? Hopefully you know the answer to this question, and it is the proteins your body makes directly cause many of your traits to be what they are. You look the way you do, and your body functions the way it does because of the proteins that your body makes. We should also note that the recipes or instructions for creating these proteins come from your genes, which are small sections of your DNA.